Hey there and welcome to the Weavers world. If you've ever watched Blade Runner or read the Neuromancer novels and thought to yourself, man, this stuff looks awesome, I wonder what living in a world like this would be like, then Shadowrun is a game you might want to check out. In this game, set in a dystopian future where corporate greed has taken on truly bizarre dimensions, you will play a Shadowrunner, a mercenary who will do other people's dirty work. But even though the world of Shadowrun is incredibly advanced in terms of technology, there is magic to be found as well. In fact, technology and magic are almost equally important in the Sixth World, and most people have had experience with both. But they are mutually exclusive in a way. Why people become Shadowrunners, what kind of skills they need, and just how bad corporations have gotten in the future. Let's find out, shall we? Like this video, subscribe for more like it, and let's see what the Sixth World has to offer, chama. Shadowrun is set in the Sixth World, which is basically the entire globe in a future where magic has resurfaced. The whole world has since been turned upside down and inside out, with creatures such as dragons, elves and orcs making a return from the collective unconscious into reality, and it all started with a ferret. Just as the year 2000 began, a new species of ferret was discovered near Chicago that was dubbed the century ferret. It baffled most of the scientific community that this had not been discovered earlier, since the century ferret possessed some rather noticeable traits. It later turned out that this little critter was the first of many so-called awakened, beings who were influenced by the resurgence of magic around the world and had a natural affinity for it. Just a bit later, the foundation for what would later become Megacorporations was laid, when the US government decided to rule in favor of the Japanese Shiawase company. They argued that they should be exempt from certain governmental laws as they prevented them from protecting their own and, by extension, their customers' interests and safety. However, these two events were not as dramatic and seminal as what happened almost a decade later when Whitus broke out in India. Within barely a year, this deadly virus claimed the lives of almost a quarter of the world's population, with no hope or cure in sight. Whitus caused governments to collapse and tension around the world to rise. This culminated in uprisings and wars around the globe, costing even more lives. This was the worst time, of course, for anything else to happen, and yet it did. The first babies with what became known as UGE were born, showing traits associated with elves and dwarves from mythology, a metaphor that took only months to be fully integrated into the common vocabulary. Many people saw UGE as another symptom or maybe a second wave of Whitus, and thus these children were shunned at best and, at worst, they and their whole family were lynched. Later the same year, the first dragon was spotted. Passengers of a Japanese Shinkansen saw that a dragon had flown alongside their train towards Mount Fuji. This was first discarded as a tasteless hoax, but later proved to be true when the very same dragon appeared at Mount Fuji and introduced himself as Ryomyo. He was the first of many dragons to show themselves the following years, but none of them were as influential early on as Dunkelzahn, who rose up in Denver and actually agreed to an interview that lasted 12 hours in total and explained that the resurgence of magic in the world, called the Awakening, caused many of the phenomena currently observed in the world, such as UGE or the ever-rising number of weird animals and plants observed by experts. This awakening, according to Dunkelzahn, followed a pattern of ebbs and flows in magic energy. Another decade later, goblinization happened. Around 10% of the world's population changed into trolls or orcs, sometimes before the eyes of horrified bystanders. This sudden mutation and the fact that these people didn't look nearly as human as those affected by UGE caused them to be even more hated and vilified. The fact that a second wave of Whitus coincided with this event didn't help acceptance either, even though it was conclusively proven that Whitus was neither linked to UGE nor goblinization. During all these events, technology increased by leaps and bounds. Spurred on by Shiawase's triumph, other corporations followed suit and eventually managed to be recognized as extraterritorial entities. They wasted little time organizing themselves into the corporate court, which is basically the supreme authority over these megacorps, which have since amassed more and more power and influence, and by now dwarf countries in terms of military and political power. This, of course, allowed for them to develop new technologies faster than ever before, unhindered by laws or red tape. Progress was made rapidly, albeit sometimes at horrible cost. Of course, a lot more happened. The internet has been abolished in favor of the Matrix after the crash of 2029, the Dragon Dunkelzahn became the first non-human president of the USA and was assassinated around 10 hours afterwards. Native Americans took back sizable parts of North America after the Great Ghost Dance, and so much more. But that would take a whole video in and of itself. What's important is the reality most people live with every day in the Sixth World. They live in a company town, watching the shows, eating the food and wearing the clothes that the corporation that owns the town and employs them deems appropriate. Shows that are outright propaganda, food that only emulates the real, scarce stuff, and clothes that are just a step above mere uniforms. You come to work, sing the company hymn, work your ass off for a few lousy nuyen, get home, watch some Tridio or browse the Matrix for a few hours, go to sleep, repeat some 1,000 times, and then you die. And then there are the runners, who operate outside of all that. What almost every citizen of the Sixth World has is a SIN, short for System Identification Number. This alphanumeric string is assigned at birth and defines a person's whole life. Everything about you, where you were born, what your occupation is, if you have ever been convicted of a crime, is recorded on your SIN. Without a SIN, you are nothing. For some though, this absence of SIN can be a blessing. Whether they were born outside of the Megacorporations' reach, have abandoned their SIN voluntarily, or lead a double life with a faked SIN, so-called Shadowrunners are basically mercenaries who, as far as most of society is concerned, simply do not exist. Their services do not come cheap, but can be invaluable for other sinless individuals as well as those in highly prestigious positions. If you need to send a message, acquire something of value, or simply want to hire some extra muscle for protection, Shadowrunners are often the way to go. And while runners have found their way into pop culture through such series as Carl Combat Mage, they are mostly vilified as dangerous gangsters in real life who are unable to find a real job and thus resort to illegal activities. The truth, as always, is more complicated than that. Sure, there are thrill seekers amongst the runners, quite a lot in fact, but also people who lack a SIN and cannot find a proper job because of this, or whose SIN has been branded as criminal and is worth nothing. Sometimes their jobs are exciting and full of awesome stuff, but most of the time they are either mind-numbingly boring or gritty, dangerous and miserable. Unskilled runners are a dime a dozen, but those who survive this occupation long enough are experts in their chosen field, whether they are warriors, mages or technology experts. When you play a group of runners, most likely you will meet with Mr. Johnson, or Herr Schmidt, Tanaka-san, Mr. Khan, Monsieur Beaumont, or however your employer will call themselves. Mr. Johnson has many faces, can be met almost anywhere runners are to be found, and is just a concerned private citizen with no ties to any corporation whatsoever. Mostly. Some Johnsons actually wear their corporation's name on their sleeve. For instance, the Johnsons of German Megacorps Krupp always call themselves Brackhaus. Whatever the case, Mr. Johnson has a job for you that needs utmost discretion and will be paid well. Most of the time this payment will be made in cred sticks, which have the nice advantage of not being registered to any one person, so they leave no troublesome paper trail. Once you have done your job, Mr. Johnson pays you, and you may have another job with him in the future. Just as likely though, you'll never see him again. Any member of a runner group needs some talent the group finds themselves in need of. There are combat experts, such as the street samurai, who often beef up their already impressive physique with cybernetic augmentations, or the adepts who use magic to improve their combat abilities. Maybe your character had magical training at a university or from a shaman and uses this to help their crew. Or they are a decker who is handy with all kinds of tricks around the matrix, or a rigger who is an expert with any kind of vehicle. Runners often adopt shadow names for themselves, pseudonyms that reflect their personality or skills, and more often than not you will earn one of those monikers over the years of working in the shadows. If you survive that long, that is. Shadowrun has no character classes per se. There are some archetypes in the rulebooks that give you an idea how a character with a certain focus could feasibly be played like, but their prioritization-based system allows for you to create a character in any way, shape or form you see fit. You can even give your character augmentations like artificial limbs or muscles, a data jack to use their mind to access computers, or skill wires which will teach you skills in seconds. But beware, cybering yourself up too much changes you and atrophies your soul. At least that's what many people believe. And it seems like they are right. Heavily cybered people are indeed lacking in empathy and something else that is hard to grasp but makes them immediately recognizable. Most runner groups are organized, with every person who joins bringing a talent the group is in need of. That can be beating people up, driving the escape vehicle, or acting as the group's face to smooth over negotiations and talk your way into a building without firing a single shot. At the end of the day, all that matters is a successful run. And a successful run usually means that you survived and got paid. What a run looks like is always wildly different and dependent on what Mr. Johnson needs. For example, a run could simply mean breaking into a warehouse and stealing whatever is inside. It could also entail kidnapping a rich exec's daughter or breaking into their private home to mess it up a bit and send a message. Or maybe something more esoteric entirely, like subtly rearranging an office so that the feng shui that was carefully constructed to make business conducted there more efficient gets turned around and achieves the opposite effect. Runners are expendable, but still highly specialized and come at hefty prices, which also includes discretion. Since they do not exist officially, runners can and often do get killed in action with impunity. After all, without a sin to attribute it to, nobody really died. Such is the life and death of the runner, and while it is often romanticized by non-runners, it is a hard, thankless and dangerous job only those with nothing to lose or borderline suicidal personalities can stomach for long. And that's Shadowrun, a system that is both pre- and post-apocalyptic at the same time, with capitalism having taken a turn for the extreme once again. But even in the urban hellholes that cities in Shadowrun have become, there is hope shining through. Hope alone is not enough though. You need to act on it, and you need to survive to see it through. If you have any questions about Shadowrun or have a system you'd like to see me cover, tell me in the comments. If you like this video, you can of course always tell me and click the like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to my channel. Until then, see you soon.